Canada's 2025 budget review. I spent all day yesterday reviewing the budget. That's why I didn't publish any videos yesterday. I wanted to take a deep dive into the budget, nearly 500 pages worth, so that you don't have to. Get ready, Canada, because this budget is about to affect your life in a good way or in a bad way. By the end of this report, you're going to have a good understanding of what this budget means for you. Let's get into this report. Ottawa says Canada is the strongest in the G7. Canada strong. They brag about having the lowest GDP to debt ratio. Meanwhile, half of Canadians are $200 away from insolvency.
Insolvency firm MMP says Canadians have entered 2025 feeling pessimistic about their personal finance rates. MMP's latest consumer debt index survey found that despite interest rates declining, half of Canadians say they're $200 or less away from not being able to pay their bills and debt payments each month.
If that is strength, then explain to me why Canadians can't afford rent, groceries, or gas. Explain to me why every single dollar that you make gets swallowed by interest, inflation, and taxes. Explain to me why your paycheck buys less every single year. The 2025 budget spends nearly $500 billion on a so-called nation-building investments. Yet after all that, our deficits actually grows and our GDP barely moves. Even in their very best case scenario, the upside is microscopic, while the downside risk is ginormous. That is not a plan. That is an admission that they don't believe their own investments are going to work. Because if these investments truly paid off, we'd see booming growth, we'd see balanced books, and we'd see a rising living standard across Canada. But instead, we get another round of slogans. While you, the taxpayer, keeps paying Ottawa for generational mistakes. Today, I'll show you what this budget really hides. Why the so-called Canada Strong Plan actually guarantees long-term decline. And how we could flip this country around into a zero deficit, booming growth economy within 3 years if we just got government out of the way. Budget 2025, the illusion of strength. Why Canadians feel poor in the strongest G7 country. Let's start off with the most important aspect for everybody. Will your life become more affordable with this brand new generational budget? No. No, it's not going to get more affordable. Your life is going to be more expensive. They did only 2 measures to make your life more affordable, and they were announced during the election. The removal of the consumer-based carbon tax and the middle-class tax cut of 0.5% this year and 1% next year. The removal of the consumer-based carbon tax did lower the price of fuel, but that was offset by the reckless retaliatory tariffs that the Liberals did on the U.S. on food imports. So all of the prices on food at the grocery store exploded in price. Just look at the coffee price, up 40% this year alone. Or look at beef prices, up 50% this year alone. Every single dollar that you saved pumping your car with gas was spent on additional food expense. And if we look at the middle class tax cut, it is so insignificant and insulting. 22 million Canadians got a little peanut of a tax cut. You have to be at the top income earner to get their $840 per family. But if you're middle class or lower income, you are getting a significantly less amount. And again, That small amount of money that you saved on taxes gets gobbled up by inflation. Insurance is up. Property taxes is up. Everything is more expensive, meaning that savings got completely wiped out. Let's go into this budget. This budget is nearly 500 pages. I've read the entire thing surprisingly, and I'm going to save you the hours upon hours of reviewing this headache. The first 2 pages covers justification for generational spending, saying that we have lots of financial room if we compare ourselves to other G7 countries. Canada has what the world needs and increasingly what the world wants. You know, the thing is, with all of this gobble goop, it's all wishful thinking. Everything is a wishing, throwing a coin into a wishing well. What I also find quite hilarious is on the front page and then page 4 and 5, there's this boat. A boat, as if we make boats in Canada. Why are we buying 4 ferries from China? If we're Canada strong and we're putting this on our front page of our budget, as if we're the #1 at building ships in the world. So this kind of sets the tone for this budget. A fake budget. Imaginary. Let's take a look at this top one here. 75% of their new spending is going towards significant global economic shifts. So the additional spending on top of the fall economic statement from Chrystia Freeland when she resigned was already ginormous. And that's why we're at the $78.9 billion deficit overrun, the largest in Canadian history outside of the pandemic. We're going to get into the figures. So, of course, they want to this is the highlight section. So, of course, they want to be like, look, Canada's strong fiscal position enables us to respond to global challenges. Net debt to GDP ratio in the G7. 13.3 compared to, and then they show all of them significantly higher. One thing that's not in this, how expensive is real estate prices in Canada? How much are taxes in this country? How many people in the population are currently visiting the food bank? How many people have food insecurity in Canada? 25.5%. And I already told you, over half of the population is $200 away from insolvency. So maybe the government is doing fine. But you and I, oh yeah, we're all away. We're ready to just let the boat sink to the bottom of the ocean. Take a deep breath. $450 billion is going to be spent on capital investments in Canada over the next 5 years. Infrastructure, productivity and competitiveness, defense and security, and housing. Why did I say take a deep breath? It took this government 6 months, 6 full months to open one office of projects of national interest. We're getting our first budget from Mark Carney after 6 months and 2 hours late. Imagine how slow this government is going. And they honestly believe if you throw $450 billion at something, it's going to actually create something. Based on the speed of this government, all of this money, I believe, will go up into the incinerator. Someone's going to be making a bunch of cash, but are we going to get this generational boom that they're talking about? Later on in this report, I'm going to show you the boom or the bust. I think they did a decent job in describing Canada's current economic challenges, so let's review them. The cost of living remains high, putting financial pressure on families and small businesses. Unemployment has increased, driven by weak hiring and layoffs in trade-exposed sectors such as manufacturing. Businesses face ongoing uncertainty, delaying investments and an expansion as in other G7 countries. We're by far the absolute worst. We know all the charts. We're dead last. Germany is second last, and they're 10 times better than Canada. Global economic growth has slowed, and the real GDP in advanced economies expected to grow at 1.6% in this year and next year. Productivity remains weak, limiting wage gains for workers. Oil prices are lower and volatile, adding pressure to exports and revenue. You know, it's quite interesting that they added that last one about the oil. Our prosperity and our wealth has predominantly come from our natural resources. So it's quite interesting that they pointed that out. And of course, they have to add this chart that Canada has the best deal out of any US trading partner. And I actually did some research, and that is in fact wrong. We are not the number one out of all the trading partners. Mexico is better than Canada. Their effective overall tariff rate is 4.8%. We're at 5.4%. I know the liberals, they say, well, that's just a rounding error. No, it's a significant difference. They're misguiding Canadians with this. We're not the best. Show you again that Canada is one of the number one for deficit to GDP ratio, so it justifies us spending $450 billion, making sure that your kids' will have to pay this off. All right, let's get into some of this meat and potatoes. Budget 2025 projected deficits. 78 billion, 65 billion next year, 64 billion, 58 billion, 57 billion. They're showing the day-to-day operating deficit is going to go from here and all the way down. But it doesn't matter what category it's in. If you are running a deficit, it doesn't matter what color you use on a chart. It is deficit spending. This is the one thing nobody is talking about. So if you're telling me you're going to spend $450 billion in additional deficit spending, you're already spending all of the taxes that you collect from us, but you're spending even more because we need to do this generational investment. So you're telling me that in 5 years from now, our economy is not going to be booming. So we still have to run a $57 billion deficit. If they invested $450 billion, wouldn't our economy just blow up? Like everybody's making millions of dollars all of a sudden. We're paying so much taxes that this thing completely disappears and we're in the green. Our economy is flourishing. But no, this is an admission that their plan to spend all of this money will not give us any return whatsoever. We're still going to be running record deficits. For an economic genius, this is absolutely ridiculous. Let's take a look at a good thing. The government's planning on saving $60 billion over the next 5 years. That is $13 billion per year. But let's put this into perspective. Let's just take a look at the day-to-day operating balance. So the total amount of expenses that we incur in a year is $547.3 billion in 2024-2025. This year, our operating expenses is $585.9 billion. So you're telling me you're going to be saving $13 billion on that figure. So let's do some math just for fun. 13 divided by the 585.9, 2%, 2.2%. You're telling me that you're going to be saving 2.2% per year and you're going to be celebrating this? That is insane. Now I want to show you this chart because they're celebrating this chart, flaunting it. It is on page 21, one of those highlight pages. The Budget 2025 reinforces Canada as the most tax competitive jurisdiction for new business investment in the G7. Number one, look, 13.2%. Everybody else is significantly higher. The United States is at 17.6%. Now let's have some fun. Paper versus reality. That 13.2% rate is the marginal effective tax rate. It's a modeled out estimate if companies already qualify for every single credit, deduction, and super deduction as mentioned inside this report that the budget brags about. But it doesn't reflect what investors will face when they actually try to build something here. Years of regulatory delays, we know all about that. Political risk, oh, you got lots of risk with these liberals. Labor shortages, interprovincial trade walls, they're still up after 6 months of them promising by July 1st, we promise there'll be no more interprovincial trade. The Bank of Canada came out and said they're still up. And unpredictable rule changes. They always change the goal line. And guess what? Taxes are not the only variable. Business investment follows certainty, speed, and return on capital. It's not just the nominal tax rate. See, the United States shows the 17.6 on paper, but it still is more attractive environment because projects get approved in months, not years. Energy, manufacturing, and tech regulations are stable. The states compete on incentives. There is no federal carbon tax whatsoever. No industrial carbon tax, no consumer carbon tax. Federally, that is. So while Ottawa claims the lowest tax rate, investors are voting with their feet. $54 billion in capital outflow in the first half of 2025 alone. And if you look at this chart, we already had the lowest nominal tax rate at 15.6%. So this minor reduction to 13.2 will make absolutely zero difference. Money is going to be flooding out of this country because of their industrial carbon tax, because we have a hostile environment to do business. Canada's tax certainty. The US rewards productivity. In Canada, the moment that you succeed, new rules, new reviews, or levies appear. In the United States, the more that you invest, the faster you could write it off. So investors see Canada competitive tax rate as a mirage layered over bureaucracy. So these hidden costs, they actually erase all of our advantage. The carbon compliance and clean fuel standard cost, higher power prices, labor costs, slow permitting timelines that destroy your internal rate of return. By the time that your project actually starts, the effective total burden is higher than most US states. So the bottom line is, if tax competitiveness matters in isolation, capital would be flooding into Canada, not leaving. The fact that investment keeps fleeing tells you that our system is structurally broken. It's not that capital is scared of taxes. It's scared of Canada's political and regulatory risk. So as Ottawa waves this chart and says the Canadians have the lowest tax rate in the G7, but investors don't care what is printed on a budget slide. They care how fast they can break ground, how stable the rules are, and how much red tape they'll have to drown in. And on every single one of those metrics, Canada fails. That's why $54 billion have left Canada in just the last 6 months alone. The lowest tax rate in G7, sure. Lowest confidence in the G7, also true. Here's something I could wrap my head around is actually putting a cap on program expenses, which is the blue right here at 0.5%. It was 8.1% growth year over year throughout the entire time Justin Trudeau was in charge. They're putting a cap on it. This is a promising sign. Let's see if they could actually do it. I want to take a look at their mission statement for their historic generational investment, building Canada strong. But there's a section here that I want to highlight. Through Canada's new climate competitiveness strategy, we are strengthening Canada's leadership in a low-carbon economy. With the Clean Economy Investment Tax Credit, we will be supercharging affordable, net zero energy projects that turn our natural wealth into long-lasting prosperity while protecting the planet. Canada will build for the future, leveraging nuclear, solar, wind, clean hydrogen, and other renewable energy. This is where we're in big trouble, Canada. We are not going to be an energy superpower with windmills. We didn't hear any pipeline talk in the mission statement. So what I did in the 500 pages, I put into the top pipelines. How many times did pipeline show up? Pipeline showed up 5 times on 500 pages. The Pathway Plus, an Alberta-based carbon capture and storage network and pipeline project that will substantially reduce emissions with additional energy infrastructure that will support the strong conventional energy sector while driving down emissions from the oil sands. Pathways will facilitate low-carbon oil exports from Alberta oil sands to a range of markets that demand Canadian energy. Nowhere does it say a pipeline to the BC coast. It doesn't even say a pipeline to the East Coast. Nowhere does it say that there's going to be a new pipeline. It just says the Pathways project is on the radar. Now we got 4 more times it's mentioned in this document. Let's take a look. Leverage strategic opportunities in Europe. Down here we have pipelines again, but get this. This section says, a new strategic export office at Global Affairs Canada will curate a pipeline of international business opportunities. So the pipeline here is a pipeline of business, not a pipeline of oil. Let's move on to the 3rd time it's mentioned. It says right here, support Canadian firms' innovation to export pipeline. Innovation to export is also not an oil pipeline. It's, I guess, exporting innovation. Let's look at number 4. It's again, the support Canadian firm innovation to export pipeline, not oil and gas. We only have one more to look at. Is it going to be a beautiful pipeline to the East Coast or the North Coast or just south? Why don't we sell more oil to the United States? 1, 2, 3. Oh, the exact same thing. Global Affairs Canada to support Canadian firms' innovation to export pipeline, not oil and gas. This Liberal government is selling Canadians that they want to be an energy superpower without oil and gas. Building major infrastructure for the 21st century. Here's where you're going to be very disappointed. First, trade and transportation infrastructure. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a pipeline on this list? The only thing we have here, $19 billion for Indigenous communities and municipal infrastructure, $37 billion for infrastructure and assets, for example, healthcare innovation, and $54 billion in core public infrastructure like water, wastewater, and transit. So this one here is probably going to be the high-speed rail. So if you live on the prairies or BC coast, you're not going to see any of that money. So $115 billion is going to be spent, with none of it going towards building out our natural resources. I have to say, once this $115 billion is spent, yes, there's going to be construction jobs and jobs to deliver on all this infrastructure. However, once that's done, it's not going to be bringing in any revenue whatsoever. Water mains, water, wastewater, a hospital, all of these things are not going to make us rich. We're not going to get rich with this investment. Once it's spent, it is gone. Supercharging growth, $110 billion. Other tax credits is the largest at $34 billion. Scientific research and experimental development tax incentives, innovation support program, productivity super deduction. All of this stuff is not going to result in this booming economy. It's all going to be wasted money, guaranteed. This money is going into the incinerator. They're going to use the $110 billion to prop up and try to bring businesses here to do businesses in Canada. But we all know what happened to all of the EV investments. The $55 billion went poof, and they're all leaving to go down to the United States. So this money is as good as gone. They're going to spend $30 billion to supercharge home building. They want to double the pace of home building from 250,000 to 500,000 homes. And they're also going to be eliminating the GST for the first-time home buyer for homes under $1 million. How much are Canadians going to save? If you buy a $1 million home, you will be saving $50,000. If you buy a home between $1 million and $1.5 million, you'll still save, but it will be cut in half to just $25,000. If it's 1.25, if it's 1.5 million and above, there is zero GST rebate available. Saving $50,000 on a $1 million home is not going to do much, but it's better than nothing. Is this going to make life more affordable for our young people? No. Will they potentially get into the housing market? Maybe. After a decade of having the Liberal government in charge, we all know what happened to housing. And that is why the Liberal boomers across Canada, not all of you, I know there's a lot of conservative voters out there that are older. I'm talking about the Liberal boomer. They vote Liberal every time because they want their nest egg to double and triple so they have a sweet retirement, but kiss those kids goodbye. So the Liberals believe that they're going to be able to get $1 trillion in total investment. So $450 billion from the government and $550 billion from the private sector to support these nation building projects, with the first 5 projects representing $60 billion in capital investment. And in the coming month, we're going to get a new list of nation building projects, which would trigger $150 billion in total capital investments. I believe that this is an imaginary fantasy number. I hope you made it this far in this report. This is the most important part. I know it was a long report, but there's a lot of information to cover. The deficit in different economic scenarios. Chart 37 and chart 38. This is what's going to blow your mind. Let's take a look at chart 37 first. This year, we already have a catastrophic deficit of $78.3 billion. It could go up to $80.1 billion on a downward scenario and just improve slightly if we do better than expected. But let's just take a look at next year. If things go bad next year, we could be running a $72.2 billion deficit. It is so insane, these numbers. And if things go well, we get $65.4 billion. If things go absolutely perfect, where we sign an amazing trade deal with the United States, we'll improve to $59.7 billion deficit. So we're only improving by $5 billion on the absolute best case scenario where all cylinders are we're firing at all cylinders. We sign an amazing trade deal with the United States and the global economy is booming. We improve $5 billion, still running $60 billion deficit. But if things don't go well, the swing is $12 billion to the downside from 60 to 72.2 billion. That means if things do not go well, we don't sign a renegotiation of the USMCA and the global economy doesn't do well, the downside risk is catastrophic. It's double the downside risk to just a single upside. Check out 2027 and 2028 with the downside risk scenario, $78.3 billion. It's basically just as bad as this year. These are projections. It could be far worse than $78.3 billion. And $63.5 billion on everything's doing okay. To the absolute best, it's to $56 billion. Look at how wide this swing is. And if things don't go well, every single year we'll be running close to $100 billion deficit. Let's look at chart 38. The federal debt to GDP ratio in economic scenario. Check out the absolute best upside. And you know they're going to be looking at this saying, hey, if things go really well, so they're going to be buffing up this report. It's only improves by this slight little bit, but if things go bad, look how fast the downside scenario runs out of control. If things go bad in Canada, this entire thing's going to blow up. No joke. We have an update on immigration numbers inside the budget. It says 380,000 permanent residents every single year for the next 3 years and an additional 385,000 in 2026 for temporary foreign workers. So we're going to be at 750,000 newcomers every single year for the next 3 years. What do you think, Canada? Should we not shut the door for a few more years and allow our country to recover after allowing 10% of our population as temporary foreign workers or temporary visas? Absolutely ridiculous. They're trying to bring the number down to 5% over the next 3 years. Let's see if they're able to do that. I have to say, this budget is not for our Canadian youth. We have Canadian youth at 15% unemployment rate, and it's not going to be improving. We continue to have way too many people taking up our Canadian youth jobs. And for my viewers that live in White Rock, they actually have in the 2025 budget, as part of the infrastructure projects, the White Rock Pier. As we know, it was blown away by that storm. A lot of Canadians are going to like this chart. Canada's oil and gas production has an emission advantage, and that's before their Pathways project. Canada is actually the 7th lowest out of all of the oil producing nations on the planet. That means we should be selling all of our oil and gas, displacing Venezuela and all the other oil producers that emit way more emissions than we do. By the way, zero emissions and net zero is all over this budget. They're really pushing hard. They want to get to net zero by 2050, and they're going full steam ahead. We all know Mark Carney has all of his investments in net zero, so it's no surprise. I had no idea that we paid for our RCMP officers to get cannabis for medical purposes. They get a benefit as part of their salary. And in this budget, Mark Carney's decided that $8.50 per gram was too much, so they're going to transition to reimburse the RCMP members to $6 per gram moving forwards. RCMP officers. And we already know they're going to be hiring 1,000 personnel, but they're not going to be hired right away. They're just giving them the money, and then they're like, yeah, go hire them. So it might be several years, but we're only getting an additional 1,000. And here we go. DEI, rainbow, pride parades, all of the above. $500 million. That is something that I think we should cut if this is an austerity budget. Nope. Number one priority. Here's my last chart. Then I'm going to do my closing remarks. But isn't it incredible that we're going to be spending $450 billion for projects of national interest and running record deficits, number one largest deficit outside of the pandemic in Canadian history. And we're only going to see 1.1% GDP growth in 2025, 1.2% in 2026. Then we might get to 2% after that. I don't know, Canada, but this is pretty terrifying to think that we're going to spend a record amount of money and only get 1% growth. This is an admission that their economic plan is a disaster. Closing remarks. I didn't mention, but they're going to be cutting 40,000 public sector jobs, 16,000 per year for the next 3 years mainly through attrition. It's not enough because Justin Trudeau grew the size of the public sector by 40% and grew wages by 60%, but it is something. So we should be happy about that. Canada doesn't need another government plan. What we need is oxygen, not another anchor. This budget doesn't make life easier. It'll make Ottawa bigger, slower, and more expensive because there's no amount of spending that fixes a country that punishes hard work and blocks growth and taxes success. But it could turn fast if we cut red tape, if we balance the books, if we unleash builders, innovators, and energy producers. Let Canadians keep more of the money that they earn. We would be able to watch this country roar back to life. If that's something that you want, this is not something the Liberals are willing to give you. It's not part of their values. The path to prosperity isn't more government. It's getting the government out of the way. It's time to turn decline into momentum, debt into discipline, and frustration into freedom. If you made it this far in this report, you are absolutely awesome. Way too long, but I wanted to do a thorough budget report for all of you. I'm going to go back to my regular segments. There is a lot of updates coming. Make sure you leave me a comment. I'll see you on the next report.